So basically, this is the story behind the initiation of the cap law. So what happens is when you're filing a H1 for the first time, it comes under the cap. So there's a 65,000, well, 65 plus 20,000, so 85,000 numbers available for H1s every year. So if you've never been on a H1 before and you're filing for the first time, you would most probably come under the cap unless you're working for an exempt organization. So if you're coming under the cap, what happens is you're allowed to file your H1 6 months in advance. And you have, so just to again go back a little bit more, with the H1, we first start off with the H1B registration, which is just a simple online process whereby they collect some basic information, and based on that information, the beneficiary's name, company's name, etc., they run a lottery. Because always during the cap, even because there are only 85,000 numbers available, the number of people applying for the H1 are 4 times or 5 times the amount when compared to the numbers available. So obviously they cannot do first come first serve, because all the petitions arrive on the first day, which is the first possible day to file is April 1st. So in the past, all petitions would come in on April 1st, and since they cannot accept all the petitions and they can't, all of them came in the same day, they would have a lottery of all those petitions that came in on April 1st. So they were inundated by hundreds and thousands of applications, pretty much 400,000 applications this year. So what they would do is then do a lottery system, and based on a random lottery conducted by the computer, they would randomly pick out cases so that it's fair for everyone. But you have to file the entire application. Now, since 2019, they have started a new process, which is called the H1B registration process. So there's a pre-registration for H1s. Before you file the petition, in March, you're allowed to file a simple application online, and then that application is taken by USCIS and the lottery is run based on just that simple application instead of filing the entire petition. So that happens in March. That's like a pre-registration process. And once the lottery is done, they inform us of the who's been selected in the lottery by March 20th or so, before April 1st. And as of April 1st, we're allowed to file. The start date, remember the start date, the fiscal year start date for new H1Bs every year is October. It's not January. It's the start of the fiscal year, so it's October 1st. And since this H1B registration process started as per the law, they have to file within 90 days. So if it's April, then they have to file by June, right? So you are filing your H1 in advance, either 6 months in advance or 3 months in advance, 4 months in advance, June, yeah. So what happens then is often a person may not be in status for that long. So the underlying status that the person has, if it's provided it's a change of status, of course, and the most common example used is an F1. And there are a lot of, for the H1B cap cases, there are a lot of students that apply. More students than people coming from outside the country. So these students, when they apply, the people on F1 status, they have an underlying F1 status. But that underlying F1 status may not be valid until October 1st. So often, before this law came into existence, there would be a gap in their status. So sometimes they would have to leave the country and then come back on a H1. Sometimes they would have to keep on extending their F1 until October 1st, and lose OPT or CPT or whatever work status that they have. And so that was an inconvenience, because to maintain status even after filing the H1 is not easy. So USCIS came up with this law called the cap law. So the cap law basically says that once the H1B petition is filed, what needs to be done is that the copy of the H-1B petition has to be then given to the DSO, designated student officer, and then the DSO, based on the copy of the H1 and of course receipt, delivery, proof. So proof of delivery would be FedEx receipt, or could be UPS or whatever courier services you're using. You make sure you use a courier service. Then based on that receipt from FedEx and acknowledgement from FedEx or UPS, they would then apply under CVIS for the cap gap. So they would change the CVIS so that your status artificially continues the way it was on the date of filing. So say as of April 1st, if you're filing on April 1st, you were on a OPT status, but your OPT card was expiring sometime in June. And you will not start your H1 until October or later, because you remember we're filing 6 months in advance and the start date on the H1 is October 1st. So now with this cap law, you're artificially extending your OPT period until September 30th. So that is the advantage of the cap rule.
Right.
And that's the reason why they have, this cap law.
Right.